within the NNPC in the last year. So finally, the result is out. We'll be looking at that today. The report, rather, is out. We'll be looking at all of that today. The income generated, tax paid for, and also, as well as resources, sent or given to Nigerian government. We'll be looking at all of those angles today on today's edition of the program. But before we get deep into the conversation, let's just bring you updates on business report that we had from the previous end of business day. Please take a listen.
And welcome to Business Report. Currency traders have attributed the persistent weakening of the naira and the volatility of the foreign exchange market to the lack of consistency in dollar allocation to the Bureau de Change operators by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The BDC operators, who admitted to the positive impact of the dollar sales by CBN, however, noted that lack of continuity of the exercise gave rise to loss of confidence in the forex market by the customers, thereby putting pressure on the parallel market. They had advocated for the intervention by CBN in the retail end of the market to be at least once or twice a week. It could be recalled that the CBN on July 18, 2024 approved the sales of $20,000 to Bureau de Change operators at the rate of 1,450 naira to $1 as part of efforts to address forex scarcity, especially at the retail end of the market, and strengthening the naira. The allocation of the forex to BDC operators was coming at a time when the demand pressure was high, with the exchange rate hitting above 1,600 naira to $1. In approving the sales of dollars to BDC, the CBN noted that it had observed the continued distortion in the retail end of the market, which is feeding into the parallel market and further widening the exchange rate premium. This measure is expected to meet the demand for invisible transaction, curb the widening exchange rate premium observed in the parallel market, and ensure a more stable exchange rate. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited pledged a total of 221,000 barrels of crude oil per day to offset a $6.55 billion debt incurred in 2023, according to the company's audited financial statement. The NNPCL financial statement, which was unveiled during a press briefing in Abuja, shows that the total debt of $1 billion was for the rehabilitation of old and new Port Harcourt refinery, $1 billion for the acquisition of Dangote refinery equity stake, $3.3 billion for forex stabilization, $950 billion for general corporate purpose, and $300 million for the acquisition of OML 86/88. The chairman of the NNPC Limited Board, Pius Akinyelure, says the company posted a 3.3 trillion naira profit after tax in the 2023 fiscal year, with 2.1 trillion naira dividend for shareholders, while the chief financial officer, Umar Ajia, says the company paid royalty worth 2.15 trillion naira from its operations. For the first time in 3 months, Nigerians are experiencing some relief as diesel price fell in July, easing to 1,379 naira per litre, according to the latest report by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. The NBS Diesel Price Watch for July 2024 revealed that the average retail price of automotive gas oil, commonly known as diesel, paid by consumer dropped by 5.71% from 1,462 naira in June 2024 to 1,379 naira in July. In terms of regional price variations, Taraba State recorded the highest average price at 1,721 naira to a litre, followed by Borno at 1,694 naira and Bauchi at 1,619 naira. Conversely, the lowest average price were reported in Kogi at 1,186 naira, Kano at 1,211 naira and Osun at 1,246 naira per litre. Debt Management Office sold a total of 374.75 billion FG bond, double its offer as investors continue to look in for long-dated bond against projected dip in rates. It sold 5 times its offer on its longest tenor, that is, reopened 9-year bond in August FGN bond auction on Monday. The 190 billion bond FGN bond offers across 3 tranches is the lowest auction this year, down from 300 billion naira offered last month. The reduced offer size signaled a possible reduction in government borrowing since yields are quite elevated, maybe highest in a while. The month's offer include a reopen of 50 billion naira 9-year bond and 70 billion naira 5-year and 7-year tenor bond each. Kike Lomo Okeri, Global Television News.
Thank you so much, Ikelomo Okere, for that business update. Now, let's bring you up to speed with what just transpired in the NNPC. That's from 2023. Nigerian State Oil Company (NNPC) Limited has released its 2023 full-year audited results, showing a profit after tax of 3.29 trillion naira. This represents a significant increase from the 2.5 trillion profit reported in the year 2022, making a 31.6% increase year-on-year growth and the largest corporate profit reported by any Nigerian company. Total revenue generated for the year was 23.9 trillion or 26.4 billion US dollars, using the exchange rate of 907 naira to a dollar, which was the closing rate used for the year 2023. Revenue from Nigeria amounted to 21.3 trillion, representing 89.1% of total revenue, indicating that the corporation earned the majority of its income domestically rather than from international operations. So now let's look at the key highlights of all of these revenues that were gathered and how, angles and where it all came from. So the general revenue that was gotten from NNPC in the year 2023 was 23.9 trillion versus 8.8 trillion of 2022 now, which accumulate to a 171.5% increment. That's a margin. Then the gross profit, which was at 7.7 trillion versus 2.1 trillion, which is a 233% increment from 2022. Operating expenses, which is at 3.1 trillion versus 1.7 trillion, which is at 80.9% increment. Operating profit, which is at 4.3 trillion versus 694.2 billion, which is at 525% increments. Per tax profits, which is at 5.9 trillion versus 1.8 trillion, which is at 227% increment from 2022. Income tax, which is at 2.69 trillion, is profit after tax, and then profit after tax is at 3.29 trillion versus 2.5 trillion, which is at 30.6% increment. So total assets, which is at 246.8 trillion versus 58.5 trillion, which is at 321% increment. So the net assets for the NNPC, which is at 28.5 trillion versus 9.2 trillion, which is at 200% increment. Then cash and bank balance 7.1 trillion versus 2.3 trillion, which is also at 200% increment. Cash flow from operations, which is at 10 trillion versus 4.6 trillion, which is at 117.3%. Cash inflow from investing, which is at 3.7 trillion versus 2.1 trillion, which is at 76.1 trillion. So NNPC Limited has reported that it does not have any external loans. So basically, it's looking as if everything that was made by NNPC is going to remain in the purse of the NNPC. But the total assets surpass Nigeria's nominal GDP. Even more remarkable is the company's total assets, which were reported at a staggering 246.8 trillion, or you can value it at dollar, which is at 272 billion, using the 907 naira exchange rates to a dollar, which is at a 2023 closing calendar, or you could say $154 billion using 1,600 to a dollar as of August 2024, surpassing Nigeria's nominal gross domestic product, which is GDP. Then now let's move away from that and then look at what the National Bureau of Statistics have to say. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigerian nominal GDP was 229.9 trillion in the year ended December 2023, while the GDP and the total asset refers to the different things in the realms of finance and economy. It, however, highlights just how large the size of NNPC is. A more reputable practice is the company's net assets of 28.5 trillion, which is the book value of NNPC. This represents around 12% of the GDP, more than the oil and gas contribution to GDP as at 2023. So now let's look at the analysis. The currency review of the result reveals that the company's revenue of 23.9 trillion is the largest it has ever reported. Crude oil sale. The company generates revenue from crude oil sales, petroleum product sales, natural gas, power, and service. Revenue from crude oil sale reached 14 trillion naira, a significant increase from the 3.5 trillion naira recorded the previous year. Interestingly, in terms of geographical markets, Nigeria generates 12 trillion in revenue, with Panama coming in second at 2 trillion. Crude oil sale revenue in 2022 was also higher from Panama, amounting to about 2.9 trillion compared to Nigerians' 545.3 billion naira. Petroleum product sale. The company reported the revenue of 7.1 trillion from petroleum products sales, up from 4.5 trillion the previous year. Petroleum product sale include the sale of fuel, kerosene, diesel, naphtha, and other related products. Once again, Nigeria led in terms of geographical market, generating 6.9 trillion compared to 4.3 trillion of the previous year. This represents around 97% of total petroleum products sale, with sales to the Bahamas generating just 151.7 billion, up from 129.5 billion naira a year earlier. The NNPC are also sole importers of petroleum products in Nigeria for years, relying on imports through its controversial direct sales, direct purchase, and direct purchase structure. Following the removal of the fuel subsidy on May 29, 2023, the NNPC limited profits from the diversion were expected to rise as profit sales reflect higher prices for majority of the year. So now we'll be looking at the revenue from the natural gas. Revenue from natural gas. The category represents the invoice value of the natural gas sold to the third parties, generating about 2.3 trillion naira in the revenue under review compared to 680 billion reported the previous year. Nigeria was again the major source of revenue, contributing 1.9 trillion, up from 638.7 billion in 2022, accounting for 82.6% of total revenue. The Graham Island also contributed to gas revenue, generating 402.7 billion naira compared to 3.9 billion from the previous year, and 24 billion naira and 16.3 billion naira from UK, Panama, and Cayman Island, respectively, in the previous year. Revenue from services. This includes revenue from cement contracts, time-based contracts, gas transmission tariffs, shipping, marines, and engine services. So the company generated a total of 464 billion naira during the year, up from 100.5 billion from the previous year. Nigeria contributed 379.2 billion towards the revenue from services compared to zero in 2022. Another significant contribution came from Cyprus, which generated 80.49 billion naira. Interestingly, the entire revenue of 100.5 billion generated in 2022 came from this Cayman Island. However, in 2023, the Cayman Island contributed nothing to its revenue. So looking at cash payments, NNPC Limited reported a massive increase in cash and cash equivalents by 5.23 trillion during the year, ending with a cash balance of 7.7 trillion naira. So now this is how well, the NNPC and Nigerian oil sector at large has done against its foreign counterparts. And basically, the NNPC and the oil sector in Nigeria has gained more domestically than the transactions that has been happening overseas. So now let's look at what, the remittance that the NNPC gave Nigerian government. Income tax paid was 497.2 billion naira in the year 2022 compared to 102.5 billion in 2022. Royalties paid in cash amounted to 669 billion, up from 76.5 billion in 2022. Dividends paid to its sole shareholders, dividends paid to its sole shareholders, the federal government, were 546.6 billion compared to a zero earlier 2022. Investing, the company earned 230.9 billion from the sale of properties, plants, and equipment. However, it paid 2.5 trillion naira to purchase of properties, plants, and equipment. An additional 370.2 billion naira was spent on purchases of exploration and evaluation assets. Another 1.2 trillion was also paid for the purchase of oil and gas properties. Interesting payments. NNPC Limited reported that it does not have any external loans, so the interest payments appear to be for legacy loans. During the year, it paid 441.45 billion in interest payments. So that's the report and how much NNPC made public to Nigerians on the total spendings of what they generated from the business year on year for 2023. We'll be going on a quick break, and then when we return back, we'll bring you an update of what the crypto world is all about. Please do stay with us. We'll be right back. Yes, many thanks for staying with us. Sadly, time is the curtain is beginning to close up on us because of time. But let's just get it quickly. As I close of business yesterday, the Naira gained a little bit of momentum, but dollar is seeming to be more adamant and stubborn against the Naira. But the Naira gained a little bit of momentum, and then the business closed at 1.8% increment, Naira gaining against the dollar as of yesterday. And then as well, crypto, Bitcoin is still doing excellently well, which is at almost $62,000 per coin. So all of this now is opening rooms. And then the Federal Inland Revenue Service are also working tirelessly on the new regulatory plan that they have, and as well as tax laws that will help regulate cryptocurrencies and then create more awareness for what crypto is all about. And then for those that are seeking to get investment into cryptocurrency, paths that you need to follow, and then the amount of tax that you would need to pay, because year in, year out, Nigeria record over $400 million transactional basis on the crypto markets here locally alone in Nigeria, over $400 million. So all of these things now are stuff that the Federal Inland Revenue are looking into, and then regulatory bodies, SEC, CBN, they're all putting heads together to know the kind of taxation and regulatory policies that need to be put in place for this business to move in seamlessly in Nigeria. My name is Samuel Odi. That's how much time will permit us to take today on today's edition of the program Business Point. I'll see you again tomorrow. You have a fabulous day ahead. Bye for now.